was we had many people housed that were formerly homeless in Eureka, and we were able to successfully vacate the Devil's Playground. A little bit of history, a little bit more history about Humboldt County. We are the largest coastal city between San Francisco and Portland, and the largest city in the three-county area up there. Eureka is the epicenter for trade, commerce, and industry, for public services and government services in our region. The major northwest artery in California, or one of two, I-5 being one, but Highway 101 runs through the middle of our city. Our only county jail is in Eureka. So you can imagine there are people who get arrested, dropped off, and then released homeless back out on the streets rather than being brought back to an outlying community. Our major medical center, the largest of 3 or 4 in our community, resides in Eureka. And again, almost all government services, from Health and Human Services, all of those, and many of the services for the homeless, they're all in Eureka. Yeah, and also, our only mental health facility in that area is in the city of Eureka. We have about a daytime population of 28,000, or I should say nighttime population of 28,000 in Eureka. That's what the census says. But because, again, we're the epicenter in the Humboldt Bay region for all of those things that I mentioned, our daytime population is actually about 55,000 people, so nearly twice as big as what the census says. We have to police on a daily basis. And the county itself has about 130,000 residents, largely rural. We identified 5 types of the homeless in broad terms in Eureka. You have the criminal, those opportunists, the predatory criminals that are out there amongst them. You have the truly destitute, which is what most people think of when you think of the homeless. We have the severely mentally ill. We have those with severe substance abuse issues. And then we have what we call trimmigrants. And trimmigrants are those seasonal migrant workers that come through an area like Humboldt County where they work in the cannabis industry, the marijuana industry, during the summer and fall. So they come through, they don't have a home, they have little money, they're looking to find jobs. Some of them don't find jobs, or they finish their work, they end up homeless on the streets of Eureka for a while. And they come up to trim weed, hence the name Trimmigrants. And one thing to keep in mind, looking at the homeless, and you all know this, many of them can fit in all 5 of those categories. And certainly a good portion of them, at least in Eureka, have co-occurring disorders, where they have substance abuse problems combined with severe mental illness problems, and that creates its own challenges for us. You know, if you look at the United States, the homelessness rates per 100,000, the U.S. has 210. That's about the rate. California, we're higher as a whole, 294 per 100,000. Everyone knows that San Francisco's got a big problem, nearly 800 per 1,000. Humboldt County, 1,400 per 1,000, to give you an idea of the scope of our problem. That's the equivalent in Eureka of about 2,600 per 100,000, because as of our 2015 point in time count, we had about 730 in the city. Nearly 500 of those were unsheltered. So they weren't just couch surfing, they literally were living it rough under the stars somewhere or in vehicles. So when it comes to homeless issues, we get a mixed response. On the one hand, you have those that believe they need more services, they need every help that we can get. It's all about compassion. And on the flip side of that, you have those that believe that these services serve to enable the homelessness and bring more homeless to our community. The kind of the thought, build it and they will come argument. In terms of services that we do have in Eureka, we have a rescue mission, which is faith-based. We have the Betty Quan Chin Foundation, a nationally recognized individual and organization that works compassionately with the homeless. St. Vincent de Paul, they operate a dining facility where they serve free meals. Everyone calls it free meal. And they provide essentially much of the food, shelter, and services available to the homeless in our city. We don't have any designated legal camping places for them to be currently apart from these service providers. There's not a park where you can go to and say, hey, you guys can camp there, leave in the morning. The Eureka Rescue Mission offers the only overnight emergency shelter in the city of Eureka, but there's a problem with it. They have limited capacity. They do not allow females or women on the main portion of the shelter, so no couples are allowed to be together. And a lot of homeless are like you or I, they don't want to split up. You can't bring large amounts of property with you, maybe just a backpack, but these individuals often have baggage trains or wagon trains of their belongings. there's rules they have to follow, and many of them either unwilling or unable to follow those rules, or they have dogs, and dogs aren't allowed over there. And so really, the rescue mission serves as being too high a barrier for many of the homeless that we still have on the streets of Eureka. So the community response over the years, a lot of groups have come together and tried to work together, tried to break down those silo mentalities that often exist in government bureaucracy and come up with some solutions. In 2013, the Community Homeless Improvement Project started. They had monthly meetings. We were part of those. You had the police, you had the city, representatives from the Board of Supervisors in the county, DHHS, the Sheriff's Department, business owners, nonprofits, advocates. Brought a lot of people together, a lot of talk, a few good ideas, but no lasting solutions came out of that. So our law enforcement response over the years, general enforcement that was ongoing. We'd come in when a problem got bad, rip the bandage off, by conducting sweeps and cleanup operations, which really only were a short-term fix. They didn't provide any long-term solutions. We tried to move people on. I'm not an advocate of ping-pong policing, which is where you bounce them back and forth to different problems trying to solve them. That doesn't solve anything long-term. And so again, some kind of collaborative options or alternatives are needed really to get any kind of lasting solutions beyond these short-term fixes. In 2011 and 2013, for instance, we made 639 arrests for municipal code violations. To put this in perspective, Eureka is a small department. If we're fully staffed, including the chief, it's 55 sworn officers. Right now, we're down about 8 positions, so that's closer to 45, 46, 47 officers that are available right now. Out of those 639 arrests, prior to the operation of the Devil's Playground, 325 of those suspects, or of 325, 22 of them accounted for nearly a quarter of all of those arrests. So again, these are a relatively smaller group that are responsible for a disproportionate amount of crime and disorder that's taken place. We responded in the days and months leading up to the events in the Devil's Playground to numerous shootings, stabbings, and other crime-related issues. We recovered over a dozen firearms. So it was time to come up with some new solutions, or at least new to us, up in Eureka. What we were trying to do before obviously wasn't working. So to exercise the Devil's Playground, so to speak, we decided to look at it from a POP perspective, using both the SARA model and the crime triangle, or the crime prevention triangle. The idea being to identify and solve training crime problems, in this case being the issue of the Devil's Playground, by carefully analyzing a number of factors, including the victim, suspect, and location features that are there. Because as you know, you can impact any one of the 3 sides of that triangle, you can topple that problem and solve that particular issue. So in terms of the location, we have the Palco Marsh, also known by its residents as the Devil's Playground, and that is a well-deserved title, as you'll soon hear. In terms of who the victim or target was, well, law-abiding public and the general safety and security and health and welfare of our community. And then the offenders were the homeless and the predatory, opportunistic criminals that were among them. So some of the strategies that we'll get into that we use to address these issues, with the marsh itself, we began to condense it and shrink the footprint by creating no-go zones, trying to move them to a central area that we could treat more like a hotspots policing type of situation, where we could manage the problem better. Ultimately, vacating the marsh, which again you'll hear about, and then very importantly, reclaiming and repurposing the space, which is now a waterfront trail. So taking the bad out, like a previous presentation we just watched, like they did, taking the bad out, replacing it with the good. And in terms of the offenders, we contracted with an outside group specializing in homeless-related issues called Focus Strategies. They did a comprehensive report and recommendations for the city. We are involved in a number of homeless working groups. We conducted surveys and criminal histories. Enforcement sweeps and arrests continued, and then pulling levers, the focus deterrence. Added a strategy. We amended our panhandling ordinance to give us a lot more tools. We created a shopping cart ordinance to get shopping carts away from the homeless. Services fairs, so a collaboration of service providers coming together, and our MISS team, which you'll hear more about shortly. And we created some overnight sleeping areas to give them a place to go. And then we had to educate the community and engage them because this was going to be very controversial. The more that they understood the problem, what we were doing, and why, the more buy-in we could get to help be successful with that process. We surveyed about 112 of the homeless themselves. These were officers going out into the green belts and talking to people. We also did a survey with the community and got over 2,000 responses. We ran criminal histories on those 112. 99 of them had a criminal history. 9 of the 13 with no criminal convictions had no ID, so we don't even know what their histories were. 67% of those 112 had a drug history, a 60% history of theft, or nearly 50% a history of violence. And when we're talking about criminal history, this is offenses other than those typically associated with being homeless. They self-reported during the survey process that 57% of them said that they'd been victims of crime themselves, often by members of the homeless community. 12% reported frequent victimization. 91% said they wanted to get in housing, but the challenge is they wanted that housing to be in their terms, which often doesn't align with the reality that's out there. And 52% chose where to sleep based on safety or their idea of safety, which is safety from those that would pray against them, safety from the police, for instance, and privacy. Most of them lived in Humboldt for over 5 years, so they were our problem, not just imported. A majority admitted to having substance abuse addiction, heroin and meth being two of the biggies up where we're at. And over 50% had mental illnesses, or at least self-reported mental illnesses. And then finally, over 50%, around 50%, had dogs. And I bring that up. They have dogs for a lot of reasons. Sense of security and safety, for companionship, warmth. But dogs have been a barrier to services and housing for them because many of these programs won't allow dogs. I'll skip through this real quick, but a lot of challenges. Eureka has a lot of greenbelt area. The Devil's Playground itself is roughly about a mile stretch along our bay, and near a major commercial shopping district with a lot of space for them to camp and to hide out in. And they get pretty creative, burying their camps in the ground, fortresses, moats, things like that. And we found a lot of guns out there, which posed some real challenges to the safety for both the community and our officers and the service providers out there. Community members, 73% of them felt at the time this is going on, they were afraid to walk in these open spaces due to their perception of the homeless and the crime associated with that. 80% said that they changed their shopping habits. 50% didn't feel safe living work. A lot of businesses, around 80%, had customer complaints about the homeless in the area. And about 83% said that they interact monthly or even more frequently with the homeless, so it's a constant issue in their mind. We had surveyed the violent crime that was taking place at this time. And of 51 violent crimes during one quarter, 22 had a transient-related victim or suspect. And 52% of the assaults involved a transient, 32% of our robberies, and 33% of our rapes. I'm talking about the analysis a little bit, just to move through this. We applied a lot of pop concepts, including the Sarah model and the crime triangle. I did some research on Dr. Google online about similar issues in other areas, academic searches. We contracted again with Focus Strategies, and we received a report that assessed our community, unique problems in our community with the homeless, who they were, and what their best recommendation based on their experience across the country would be for Eureka to try to address these issues. Some of the things that came out in the Focus Strategies report was that we had obviously a very challenging population with high rates of mental illness and substance abuse. They recommended rapid rehousing and housing first, and also establishing multiple services like alcohol and drug care services, mental health services, and collaborative efforts like our MISS team. Megan Schatz is one of the founders of Focus Strategies, and she literally travels the country addressing these issues in major cities. And she said of our homeless in Eureka, I've been to some of your encampments. Homelessness here is as rough as I've seen it, and I've been doing this a long time. So that was no surprise to us, but this again gives you an idea. And that gentleman there saying all of you are number one, actually he was telling me that I'm number one in this book with his middle finger. His name was Billy Joe Rutherford, and he was a transient living in the Devil's Playground. This was one of 2 times there was a shooting in his tent when we took that picture. He just accidentally shot himself in the leg with a shotgun he was showing somebody else's stolen shotgun. So that was the attitude of a lot of the most recalcitrant habitual offenders we had out in the Devil's Playground. So the working theory that we came up with for EPD and our partners, including DHHS, was a focus on rapid rehousing, increase the capacity to help the mentally ill, because we knew that we had over 50% that were mentally ill. Destroy the sense of comfort and entitlement. So the pulling levers or focused deterrence type of concept, the shopping cart ordinance, the citations for dogs, open space ordinance for storage of personal property and things of that nature. Reducing the inflow of immigrants into our community during harvest season, and reducing the visual and ecological blight of the marsh. Everyone can disagree about how homeless should be dealt with, whether you should have more compassion or more accountability, but virtually everyone agrees that there shouldn't be harm to the environment. Everyone loves the environment. So looking at the vast damage being done to the greenbelt in the bay, through the tons of trash that were being left, the needles, no public bathrooms, so all that stuff was going somewhere. How many of you had oysters from Humboldt Bay, the number 1 producer? And it's just something to think about. So again, a broad-based collaboration with our community partners that's sensible, that is doable, that's based on analysis, debate in many cases, the research, and ultimately a compassionate response, balancing that with accountability. And then we have to fund all of this somehow. And in 2014, the County of Humboldt passed, or the voters of Humboldt passed a proposal or an initiative called Measure Z. And that levied a half-cent sales tax on all sales in the County of Humboldt. Of course, Eureka, being the epicenter of commerce, was responsible for about half of those revenues. But we successfully applied for a grant for the last 3 years and basically was awarded about $1.2 million over 3 years to help fund our homeless-related projects and strategies that we were working on.
That's me.
It's you.
And services.